It's been nearly a month since Google announced that it was overhauling its privacy policy, but the response has not died down at all. On January 24th, the search giant said it would be consolidating its more than 60 privacy policies into one in order to create a, quote, beautifully simple, intuitive user experience across Google, end quote. But at this point, most users aren't seeing the advantages of these changes. In fact, because many of them are outraged by the move, Congress has asked the FTC to investigate Google to see if the new policy violates its settlement from last year. And at this time, we're going to bring in Search Industry Authority Danny Sullivan to learn more about this policy and its implications. It's great to have you today, Danny.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
You're very welcome. Well, under this new privacy policy, Google will be allowed to share user data across many of its services. So what exactly does this mean for users?
Well, potentially it gives Google a lot of new rights. One example is that if you had done searches on YouTube, Google couldn't take those searches and try to change the information that they might use elsewhere on Google, such as in web search. So if you had, or back and forth. So the example that they roll out is if you had done a lot of searching for skateboarding on Google search, then you went over to YouTube, they wouldn't be able to know that. Now they could know it, and they could potentially suggest skateboarding video to you, which sounds all very positive. On the downside, potentially Google could take your searches that you're doing out on Google and use those searches, target you with ads from across the entire web as you're surfing around and you're on the Google Content Network. And they could say, well, we know he searched for skateboards before, so let's find anybody who wants to target people who search for skateboards with new ads. And some people might object to that kind of profiling. Now, they're not doing that right now. And in fact, they said that last thing that I described about doing the ad targeting is something that they would not do. But they potentially have these new rights. And you have to understand what exactly it is that they have said that they won't do, or what exactly the controls are that you can use to prevent them from doing stuff. And some of that is not clear, and that's part of the confusion and the concern that you see going on.
Right, because at this point it doesn't appear that there actually is an opt-out feature, right?
There are opt-outs all over the place. You can't opt out of the new privacy policy if you want to continue to use something that requires a Google account. That's correct. But for example, if you don't want YouTube to know your search history, you can opt out of having a search history at all. And that hasn't changed, and you've always had that kind of control. There are a bunch of other things within Google where you're using different products and services where they have different controls that allow you to decide whether or not you want to let some data be stored or not be stored. So it's not as simple as saying there's no opt-out, because they're opting out of all sorts of things. But no, you can't opt out of the privacy policy if you want to have anything that requires a Google account overall.
All right. What do you think Google's motive is with this new privacy policy?
A lot of ways they're coming up to speed with how other websites already operate. Microsoft has sort of a unified policy in this same regard, and Facebook seems to have one as well, where when you go to Facebook and you sign up for Facebook, you don't then have to sign up a separate privacy policy for using Facebook messaging. Or if you sign up for Microsoft Hotmail, you've signed up for an online privacy policy that covers other online things that you might have to do. So these companies have these other abilities and rights to use information across their services. Google, which kind of has come from privacy policies on a per product basis, is kind of playing catch up, so that they have the ability to be more flexible both with what they may do with information and how they may use that information to improve products and services.
Do you think that Google felt at all pressured to change its privacy model given the recent crackdown in Europe?
The crackdown in terms of what's going on with cookies, or?
Right, and actually with Facebook as well.
I think this was probably something that was already in the works. I think they already recognized that they have all these different privacy policies. One of their goals had been to not have 60 or 70 different policies that everybody would have to understand, and to simplify stuff. That's something they've been doing for some time. So I think they kind of see this already fitting in with that.
Well, what about the impact on government agencies that utilize Google applications? Will this put them at an increased risk at all?
If they're using the Google Apps account, if the Google privacy policy applies to your Google Apps account as opposed to, say, a Google account, potentially you are giving Google more right to see across how information is being shared. But then with the Google Apps account, you can also prevent people who have those accounts from using a bunch of different services. It's actually kind of annoying. I have both a regular Google account and a Google Apps account, and every time I go into the Google Apps account, it's constantly asking me, do you want to be able to use YouTube, or do you want to be able to use these different services? And I'm like, no, I just wanted to have a Gmail account with my own domain address. So I didn't want to have to do all these enterprise level decisions that you're now forcing me to do.
Right. And it is interesting, several of the people that we've talked with about this, they are saying they had no idea how many Google accounts that they had until this privacy change, and they're getting so many notifications.
Yes, I think Todd Minska may have said something on Google Plus today that made me laugh. He was like, if I had to take a drink for every time I approved a Google privacy policy change, I'd be drunk by now.
Absolutely. Well, last year there was talk of privacy legislation that would prevent online tracking. What do you expect to see in this regard during 2012?
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the EU take even stronger emphasis on that. Maybe we'll have a revisitation happening in the US where, where we do get a stronger, perhaps do not track type of a rule. The industry's been trying to legislate itself so far, but, perhaps there'll be some incentive, but it's not enough.
Okay. Well, as far as search goes, how does this privacy policy impact SEO?
It allows Google to make your results even more personalized by looking at information you do in other Google products and services if they want to. But that's just a continuing trend that we already have going on. I wouldn't say it's a big major impact beyond anything we're already digesting.
Well, according to a Washington Post poll, 66% of users say that they will cancel their Google accounts over privacy changes. Do you think that this will happen?
No, I think that poll is 99% inaccurate. It's not going to happen. And I think the reason we know it's not going to happen is because Facebook went through the same sort of thing in 2010. You had lots of people lobbying for a closing off of your Facebook page day and day, and they've simply grown. I think there are too many people who simply use Google accounts that are going to and Google information who are going to decide, oh, I'm no longer going to use this. Especially because if they're that concerned about it, then their alternative is to go to another company doing exactly the same thing, right? I mean, if they don't want their email information possibly being shared with their searching information, then they could go to Microsoft, except that Microsoft has all the same rights to do that, to do the same kind of cross-sharing. So it really doesn't come down to what these privacy policies say. It comes down to the kind of controls that you're provided and given, and ultimately I think your trust in the company overall.
Well, Google launched an ad campaign to help sort of reduce some of the backlash. Do you think this will help at all?
It may help a little bit. They had actually launched this in advance of the changes coming, and it becomes clear why they had done that now. And I think they targeted it, especially, if I recall, in Washington, D.C. I think that that ad campaign maybe will reassure some people, but really it's going to come down to Google having to do a lot more PR outreach to people in Washington, D.C., I imagine.
Okay. Matt McGee recently discovered that Google has a new program called ScreenWise that pays users to give up their privacy. What do you think of this program and the timing of it?
It seems to be similar to what other companies tend to do, where they allow people to be audited and see what they're doing to try to improve stuff. And but I think the timing is probably bad. It's just another thing that kind of adds into, well, even if everybody else does it, it seems like there's something odd going on with Google at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, and also the Electronic Privacy and Information Center filed a suit against the FTC saying that it does violate the settlement that Google and the agency reached last year. And the case has been expedited to be heard before Google's policy goes into effect next month. So what do you think will come of this?
I think the FTC will probably review it. I imagine that it probably won't be seen as a violation, but we'll see how it goes. I'd have to go through and see what specifically the Epic complaint said, though. I haven't had a chance to go through to see if it named exactly how it's saying that it's violating it. But what they seem to be doing seems to be pretty straightforward and in line with what other industry companies do. So I'd be surprised if it turned out not to be something acceptable. Epic also, however, filed another complaint where they were asking for Google to release the audit review that's being done. They had agreed to these audit reviews with the FTC, but they've kept those closed, and that really surprised me. I thought that if you're going to be audited on privacy, then perhaps you ought to release the privacy audit so that the people who are worried about it, perhaps the most, if they are, the public could see it.
All right, time will tell. Danny, thank you so much for talking with us. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
And the new policy will take effect March 1st. Reporting for WebPro News, I'm Abby Johnson.